Hello, welcome to Mind Chat. My name's Philip Goff.
Hello, welcome to Mind Chat. My name's Keith Frankish.
How are you doing, Keith, me old mucker?
The old mucker. I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. I'm continuing with the good work. With the work anyway. Have you been busy?
I'm in the midst of grading, as our American friends call it. I'm halfway through 160,000 words of undergraduate dissertations that I have to grade, so a little bit.
Well, I'm
Not
hoping
not the most pleasurable part of the job. Actually, it's quite nice with dissertations, actually, because they put a bit more of themselves into it and not just marking essay after essay on the same topic, so it's not too bad, really.
excellent. Make sure you keep your blood sugar up. You know that if when people get hungry, they become more severe in their judgments. I understand. So,
Oh, I'm always very severe.
keep.
I'm not really.
Mm.
So, you want to know what's happening in the world of Mind Chat?
It's funny. I was just going to ask you that.
I think I
What is
got the
happening in
script
the world of
wrong.
Mind Chat, Philip?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, Keith. So we are attempting a technological leap forward today. We are pre-recording for the first time for an edited product. So hopefully people listening or watching to this should be enjoying a much richer and more well-honed product, which is exciting.
Right. Okay. So it's not only going to be the best philosophy, but or at least better production values.
Probably still not that good, but maybe infinitesimally infinitesimally
Infinitesimally.
infinitesimally the value of editing. Hopefully that can be edited out.
So you'll be
Infinitesimally.
able to cut out the bits where I swear or anything like that. Yeah.
We've already cut them out. Don't worry. Yes. So thanks to our kind Patreon supporters. If you want to support us to help us keep improving these production values for $2 or $10 a month, you are very welcome to do so. If you can't afford that, you can help us by simply liking the video, commenting on the video, writing us a 5-star review, subscribing to the audio podcast. Even if you don't listen to it, why not subscribe to it? Go wild. Help us. We need some help with these terrible production values to get this wonderful content out to a broader audience.
I like the poor production values. I think it makes it more authentic.
Yeah, that's what we keep trying to persuade people, but we can keep saying that, and hopefully people will
I
believe
believe
us.
this isn't all surface, all polished. This is giving you the real thing here.
You're an old romantic. You got to live in the real world, Keith, says the panpsychist.
How's the TikTok going, by the way?
I still haven't bloody done it. I still haven't done it. It's been on my to-do list for, yeah. Well, you were
The
going to do it as
the dance
well.
I saw you doing looked good. I loved the dance you were doing. I thought it was great. I mean,
Shh.
I think doing.
That was just for you. So future guests coming up, we have Peter Godfrey Smith, Andy Clark. I might do a solo Mind Chat if you're lucky. Lots of exciting things coming up. Do you want to know who we've got today?
I'm eager to know who we've got for today, Philip.
Well, one of your favorite topics, Keith.
Oh, sounds good. What's this?
Something I know you're very interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Panpsychism.
Hmm.
Well, I remember actually, Keith, when we met on the sailing ship in the Arctic 10 years ago, I remember you saying that your guilty pleasure was thinking about panpsychism. So
It's private. I go down to the library and I sometimes, I'll get one of the journals with panpsychism on, but I'll bring it home in a plain envelope, so under the counter stuff,
it's all out now. We may also delve a little bit into the self, free will, lots of exciting topics. And
Big topics. So who are we going to talk to about these big topics?
our guest today to help us with these big questions of meaning and existence is the one and only best-selling author, science editor, and all-round superhero, Annaka Harris. Annaka, welcome to that.
Thank you for having me. I'm enjoying watching the two of you. I'd like to just stay in the stay backstage and watch you two go on.
It gets tiresome after a while.
I
Yeah.
agree with Keith also that I enjoy the low production value, and I actually think that that is what a lot of people appreciate about podcasts. There's that it's not polished and that people can kind of see behind the scenes. And
I think that's right. I
I
think
was
the sense of listening in on a private chat, I think
Yes.
that's what
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. I was at a meditation retreat once, and I don't know if either of you have ever sat a meditation retreat, but there's a very formal schedule to it, and the teachers sit on this stage, and there's I don't know quite how to describe the mood of it, but you throughout the 5 or 10 days, you get the sense that these teachers are, these supreme experts who are kind of somehow, meditating in some other realm that you couldn't possibly touch. And I was in the cafeteria once with all the teachers, and they were just talking about how they couldn't wait to go shopping after the retreat was over. And it was really helpful to me. I've thought about that a lot since then, that,
absolutely.
these
Well,
people who say brilliant things on paper are just normal normal humans behind the scenes.
well,
Yeah.
well,
Even me and Keith, even Keith and I
Even
are
yes.
normal human beings until we crash.
Yeah.
well, Annika, welcome to Mind Chat. It's great to have you on. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
many people will know who you are, but would you just like to begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and about your interest in
Oh.
consciousness?
Oh, sure. I am a science writer, and I wrote a book about the science and philosophy of consciousness called Conscious. A Brief Guide to the Fundamental Mystery of the Mind is the subtitle. I worked for about 20 years with scientists as an editor to help make their work more accessible to the general public. I mostly worked with neuroscientists. And so during that time, I learned a lot more about the brain. It had been an interest of mine throughout my life, and consciousness had been an interest of mine throughout my life, actually, as well. But I became, let's see, I'm not sure the chronological order of things, but my immersion in that field got me thinking kind of my own thoughts and starting to do my own philosophy. And I kept notes over the course of 20 years. And a couple of times tried to get some of my clients to write a book like the one I ended up writing. And I couldn't convince anyone to write it, so I took it upon myself. And so I moved from editing to writing.
Fantastic. I'm I'm always interested to meet people who've moved into this area from somewhere else. I think thinking about
Mm,
consciousness, it's if you've just come to it from a narrowly philosophical background, I think sometimes you miss the bigger picture, and people who've
mm,
come to it from other areas or related
yeah.
areas like neuroscience and so on. I think they often have a perspective on it that we sometimes miss, maybe too close to
Interesting.
the trees.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I know that panpsychism is a theme in your book, so I think I better hand over here to Philip, who's the expert on that, to talk to you about that.
Well, you mentioned that. You kind of ruined my joke now, Keith. But anyway,
Oh,
never mind. Maybe we can edit
okay,
that out.
okay. Well, we're recording it, so let's do the joke.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is the problem with the editing. I can see for the two of you, or maybe more for Philip, that you are going to take too many opportunities
I
to
know, I know.
re-record.
That's
Well,
the
this is a
The
trial,
musician
isn't it?
in
To
you or
see.
something, yeah. Like, take it again.
So, Annaka, one thing I like about your work is I think you're not dogmatic, right?
Mm,
You're not sort of arguing that such and such theory is definitely the truth on consciousness. As I read you, you're exploring a variety of options in a spirit of free inquiry.
yeah.
However, however, some might think your inquiry is a little bit too free because I've noticed you've expressed a little bit of sympathy for slightly bizarre view. I had to look it up. Pan
Oh, I see.
Sorry.
I see where this is going.
I'm too I feel too
He's
self-conscious
he's
now. I've been
prepared this very
sensitive.
carefully, you see.
Yeah, now he's performing.
I know. I feel now I've said it's a joke, I feel self-conscious about it. Anyway, I've noticed you expressing sympathy for a rather bizarre view. I had to look it up.
Mm,
Panpsychism or something. This strange view that consciousness is everywhere or something. Can you tell us a
yeah.
little bit about this peculiar view and why you think we should give it any time at all?
Yes, I actually might have a surprising answer, which I don't really think we should give it any time.
Oh, that didn't go where I expected, but go on,
I know.
carry on.
So, I'm joking partly. I think it's very important at this point in time in science and philosophy to very seriously be asking the question, how far down in nature does consciousness go? And is it possible that we've been wrong to assume that consciousness arises only in brains or very complex systems, and that is actually something more basic to nature, which I at this point have convinced myself that I believe it is. As you say, I can't conclusively say. I think we truly don't know, but my strong intuition and assumption at this point, based on decades of research and thinking about this, is that it goes much deeper, probably all the way down. Panpsychism is a word that I go back and forth using, and there are a couple of reasons why I don't like the word. One is I think it does the opposite of what I'm trying to do, which is kind of claim that there is a theory to believe in, that we have resolved, that we understand. Having a title that way, having an ism, I think gives the wrong impression that this is sorted, that there is an answer to this question and we've sorted it out. I also think it just unfortunately sounds like a new age word, and that has just always bothered me. And in my work, I've had to be so careful working with scientists to ask this very controversial question, which I don't think it should be, but it has been a very controversial question. And scientists have lost their careers over asking the wrong question about consciousness, or wondering um, excuse me, wondering if there's consciousness in inanimate matter tends to not be something that is so well received in the scientific community. So, yeah, my goal is to convince scientists and the larger world that it actually is a serious question. It's a question that makes sense based on the science we have, and it's something we should move forward with. Um,
Yeah, I like the way you put it there, as the view that consciousness goes all the way down. The way I
mm,
often introduce panpsychism is starting with that spectrum, what it's
mm,
like to be a human being is very rich and complex. What it's like to be a sheep is maybe much
mm,
simpler. What it's like to be a snail, if there is anything that it's like to be a snail, much
sure.
simpler still. And as we move to simpler and simpler forms of life, we find simpler and simpler forms of consciousness. Panpsychism, and I'd forgotten we'd argued about that word before, but anyway, let's
That's
go with
okay.
it
I
for the
got to
moment.
surprise you with my answer. Actually, you know what? I should say one more thing about panpsychism, and you might be able to correct me because I'm certainly not an expert in panpsychism, but I believe that since I wrote my book, I've been working on a documentary series. So I've been interviewing more scientists and philosophers over the past 5 years or so. And my view now, and it's actually the title of an article I'm writing, is that consciousness goes all the way down, um, so that matter is essentially a representation always of of felt experiences. And so I think my view actually doesn't no longer even falls into the category of panpsychism. I could be wrong. I'm curious if you think it does, but I think I've kind of fallen deeper into some version of idealism.
That's interesting. I get this question so much. What's the difference between
I mean,
panpsychism and idealism?
well, the belief I
Yeah, well,
have
let's.
is that
Mm,
everything in the universe, what it all is felt experience. That's what the universe is. That's what everything
Yeah.
we perceive is representing, that there is nothing but felt experiences at bottom. That's the fundamental nature of reality.
That's great. So what I'd like to do, I guess, is delve into that deeper by talking about why I take that view seriously. But I'd
Mm,
like to ask you first more about why you take that view seriously. So
mm,
we've got something of a sense of what the view is now, that in some
yeah,
sense all there is consciousness.
yeah.
Consciousness is at the foundation of reality. But for some people thinking, what on earth are you talking about? Where does this come from?
I know.
Or a question I
I
get
think
asked
that
a lot.
myself, when I hear myself say it, I actually still am surprised, and it sounds crazy to me because it so goes against um, my scientific education and my
Yeah.
intuitions and everything else. Go
So
ahead. Sorry.
why should you even said then you would say you believe this view now, which I think is
If
slightly
I
more
I
confident
wouldn't
than.
say I believe it.
than
I would
okay.
say, if I had to go with let me say a couple ways I can say it. One, if I had to go with my best guess about the fundamental
Yeah.
nature of reality, what quantum mechanics is telling us about the fundamental nature of reality, what neuroscience, everything kind of points in that direction.
Right.
That, to me, that's the best guess as an answer to what the fundamental nature of reality is. Um, yeah. So it is my best guess. But my best guess maybe if I had to put a percentage on it, at most 75%,
Oh well,
like
that's
that.
more
That's
than
how
me.
far I go.
That's a bit
But I
more
started
than
at
me
50
actually.
50. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. I
People are.
keep convincing myself more and more. The more I write, the more I think about it,
Mm,
the more I become convinced.
that's really interesting
Um,
actually. People are sometimes shocked, although I've spent my career defending panpsychism. I'd still only put sort of 60% or something. But
Interesting.
but
Yeah.
can you tell us something a little bit more
Yeah.
about why you've come to take this view so
Yeah.
seriously?
So really it comes down to the hard problem, and um, in thinking about the hard problem, I don't see how you avoid it unless you put consciousness all the way at the beginning. And so if consciousness emerges at some point in nature, if it's based on some type of processing or some configuration of matter, that may be the truth. Just that if it is emergent, that is not something we can ever really understand, and we'll just be stuck with the hard problem of consciousness. There'll be this mystery at the heart of the fact that consciousness is emergent. And so if there actually is a way to solve this problem, to understand nature at a deeper reality, it's interesting to me that this actually is an answer that solves that. And so that's kind of one point of data in favor of consciousness going all the way down.
That's really interesting. So, I mean, I think that I think that sounds quite similar to my own motivation. So maybe I could just
Yeah, I'm not
share
surprised.
with
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
how I think about this, and then maybe you can tell me where we agree, where we
Hmm.
disagree. I guess the way I think about it is that there are just a couple of options on consciousness, on how it fits
Hmm.
into reality. Most
Hmm.
people go for physicalism, the view that the story we get from physical science is the fundamental story of reality, physics, chemistry, neuroscience, and then consciousness somehow emerges from physical processes in the brain. The way I think of panpsychism is it turns that story on its head.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
the primary thing is consciousness, and the story of physical science somehow emerges from some more fundamental story
That is
about
how I think
consciousness.
of it. Yes.
Yeah, and crucially for me, and I always want to emphasize this because people say, "Oh, what's the evidence?" I always want
Mm.
to emphasize both of these views are observationally equivalent, right?
Yes.
In the
Right.
sense that you couldn't do an experiment to distinguish them for any scientific data. Each
Yep.
of these theories just interprets that data on their own terms. So it's maybe a little bit like quantum mechanics, where you have all these
Yeah.
different interpretations, the Copenhagen, many worlds, Bohm, and so on. And each of these theories just has their own story to tell about how they explain the data. So it's hard to see how you can
Yes.
distinguish them experimentally. So I
Yes.
don't think we can tell which is right with an experiment, which kind of frustrates
I think
people.
we kind of just have
Mm,
starting assumptions. I don't think there's
yeah.
evidence for either, and we just have to make one. I mean, we made one starting assumption, which is that it's all physical and consciousness comes in at some point. And I think that science should keep going, obviously. And I've said many times before that I think that was the right assumption to begin with. But it really is just an assumption, and I would say there is no evidence that is the case. Even though I have a feeling Keith will disagree with me, but maybe not. But of course, I could disagree with myself on that note. I can see what the arguments are against that, but I think when it comes down to it, when we really look closely at it, what we're counting as evidence is really just assumptions based on our human experiences.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say is that, physicalism, I always find that interesting because one of my primary interests has always been fundamental physics and what this universe is, what it's made of. And so I've been reading about quantum mechanics actually since I was a teenager, because of this, deep desire to just understand, once you get down there, once you dig and dig and dig, like what is the stuff of the universe? How is it? What are we? Why? How did this all come into being? And so quantum mechanics is telling us a very strange story about physicalism, right? I mean, um, it barely fits the category of physicalism in the way we typically think of physicalism. And so we kind of lose what I think we traditionally think of physicalism when we go to the fundamentals anyway. It's almost like all bets are off at that point.
Yeah, well, I haven't told Keith this. I've actually been contemplating recently a panpsychist interpretation of quantum mechanics, which,
Yeah.
well, maybe let's not go down the rabbit hole of quantum mechanics just yet. But okay, so as you say, we've got these two explanatory projects. Both start with their own assumptions.
Hmm.
Uh, we can't distinguish them with an experiment, but what you can do, I think, and I'd like to see if you agree on this. What we can do is evaluate them on their own terms, see
Right.
how well they are doing at the things they're
Yes.
supposed to explain. So the
Yes.
physicalist is supposed to solve the hard problem, explain how consciousness emerges from physical processes in the brain. We can say, how well's that going? The panpsychist the panpsychist is supposed to do it the other way around, start with consciousness, account for the emergence of physical reality from some underlying story about consciousness. So we can ask, how well have these projects gone? And I think when we do that, the panpsychist story just looks like it's in better shape. Like we've been
Yes.
wrestling with the hard problem of consciousness for decades. I
Yes.
would argue it's got nowhere. I mean, that's different to the science of consciousness. The science of consciousness has
Yes.
made progress, but
Agreed.
solving the hard problem has not going. And I think there are good philosophical arguments that seem to show it's actually not a coherent project.
Exactly.
Whereas when it comes to the panpsychist project, I kind of think all the mysteries have been solved there, and this comes back to the
Oh, I don't know if
important
I would say
work
all
of
the mysteries have been solved, but maybe the hard problem certainly.
yeah. Well, we're not just the hard problem. So
Yeah.
in a way, you might think the hard problem doesn't arise for the panpsychists because they're starting with
It
consciousness
doesn't.
rather
No,
than
it doesn't.
but
There is no
but
problem to begin with.
but there's the mirror image of how do you account for physical reality on the basis
Yes. That
of
I think is not
consciousness.
a very hard project, actually.
So what do you think of that? How, how,
It's
how
not
do we
as
how
hard a
do we
project.
how do we close that explanatory gap? How do we solve
Mm.
the panpsychist's mirror image of the hard problem? How do we explain physical reality in terms of consciousness? You say that's not a very hard problem. I think people might think, hey, really? That seems pretty hard to me.
Compared to the hard problem.
Right, right, right.
um, but I'm realizing I'm want to take this opportunity to get more clear because you keep
Mm,
using the word panpsychism, which I never use and I don't think about
right.
it that way. I'm curious, even if we're talking about the same sort of view. And so, one question I have about panpsychism um, is the general view that there is the material world and consciousness is one property, um, or I mean, I guess this is the question you say you get asked a lot. Could panpsychism be, or a version of panpsychism, be more or less a version of idealism. If could it, yeah, I don't know how
Yeah.
else to
So
ask that question. Yeah,
that's a good way to ask it.
because I see my view as going one step further than panpsychism.
So the panpsychism. So my big inspiration here is Bertrand Russell, his important work in the
Hmm.
1920s. I think we should think of Russell as the Darwin of consciousness. I think he
Mm.
solved all the mysteries. And his essential insight, and Arthur Eddington, following him, did some work in this area as well. He was the first scientist to experimentally confirm Einstein's general theory of relativity. Anyway, their essential insight was, look, physics is just a load of mathematical structure, right?
Mm.
Physics is just a bunch of equations.
Mm.
In a sense, physics doesn't care what's going on at the fundamental level of reality as long as it has the right mathematical structure. You
Sure.
know, as whatever is down there, as
Yeah.
long as it have the right mathematical structure, you've got physics. You know,
Yes.
this is Stephen
Well, the
Hawking
question is just what
famously
is it
said.
a structure of? Um,
Exactly, exactly.
yeah.
Stephen
Yeah.
Hawking famously said, "Physics doesn't tell us what breathes fire into the equations." So the panpsychist postulates, and and as you say, you could think of this as a form of idealism,
Okay.
that at the fundamental level of reality, there are just networks of very simple conscious entities interacting in simple,
Oh, okay.
predictable ways.
Okay.
Through their interactions, they make certain
S-
patterns, certain mathematical
Let's.
structures, and those mathematical
Yeah.
structures just are what we call physics. So you get physics
Right.
out of
Yes.
underlying facts about
Sure.
consciousness.
Yeah.
So,
No, I
so,
see math. Sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, just on the idealism point, I mean, it depends what you mean by idealism. But if by idealism one simply means all there is at the fundamental level is consciousness stuff, mind stuff, then yeah, I
Yeah.
think this could be a
Yeah.
form of
Okay.
idealism.
Okay. So yeah. So we're even closer than I realized. Um. Oh,
So
I had
that's
a
so that's
thought.
what so that's one
Yeah.
way of seeing the
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
view, why this panpsychist view, or whatever you want to call it, looks in better shape, because
Yeah.
we don't know how to get consciousness out of physical
Yeah.
stuff, but I think we do know how to get physics out of consciousness. I think Bertrand Russell
Right.
showed us how to do that. So
Well,
that's
and yeah, and
the
I think it's not hard to say or to imagine that the physics and the mathematics describe the structure of consciousness. And the one mystery I find that I'm left with, I'm kind of skipping to the end, but the one mystery I find I'm left with at the end of all of this is, why does consciousness have the structure that it does? And that may just be the last unsolved mystery. But that's something I think a lot about now. But you brought up entities, which I just wanted to um, insert something there, which I actually think that the idea of entities is comes out of an illusion and makes thinking about this much more difficult. And so part of why I think I see this as a less difficult problem than many philosophers is that I don't think there are subjects or selves or entities. I can grant that there is something we could call those things, but I think the way we intuit them is wrong, and they give us these false intuitions about the structure of the universe. And so if all the universe is consciousness that has a structure, experiences arise in the universe, qualia arises in the universe, and there's no subject they're arising to, and there are no entities they're arising to. There can be qualia that get, because of the structure of consciousness, get linked across time through memory. And so there's a way in which, one qualia at one moment in the future has a connection and relationship to a qualia in the past, but they're all arising in and of themselves. And so there's a sense in which, if there's a qualia that is incorporated or related to a qualia that arose in the past, there's this illusion that there's an I that was in the past and experienced that qualia then, and then I experienced that one, and then I experienced that one, and now I'm here, rather than them simply just being. I often use the analogy of a pot of boiling water, where water, it's not a perfect analogy, but water is consciousness, and the bubbles are the content, form, the structure that it has. And so all that is actually happening is felt experience arising in, maybe infinite forms. And it is the structures that connect qualia across time, and I guess in some cases across time and space, that give us this illusion of entities, of selves, of subjects. So I think without them, it's actually much easier to draw a picture of how the universe exists as consciousness that has a structure with felt experiences, that because it's it's all one thing, it's all consciousness, it's all awareness, and because there's a form to it, there's a structure to it, every part of, we think of things in space-time terms because we're humans, and I don't quite know how to describe it outside of that, but the science is pointing us in a direction of there being no space and time, and so ultimately I think of this outside of space and time, but I have to kind of describe it this way because I'm a human being and I don't know how else to describe it. But so there's a point in space-time of qualia, that is related essentially to every other point. And so it's this interaction between qualia and how they influence and affect each other that causes the content to take place in the way it does, and then causes us to believe, as these beings, what we feel are entities, that is this qualia that is strung across time through memory, and then we have this illusion of being a self. We look out at the world as other, right? There's me in here, and then there's the world out there, and everything that I perceive in the world, under my view, would be my hypothetical view that I don't totally believe. I should give the disclaimer. Is representations of other conscious experiences arising in the universe, both of which are affecting each other. So, the conscious experience that is arising here, I see my computer in front of me, that represents many, many different consciousness, many, many bubbles of experience content arising, and how that's relating to these, is appearing for me, whatever. Oh shoot, I don't know how to finish the sentence, but however it's appearing for me gives me the impression that there is a thing out there that is made of matter that is not conscious. I'm very limited in how I can communicate with my computer. It's like for whatever the reason is that the structure of consciousness is the way it is, the set of experiences at where my computer sits has very limited ability to communicate with me or to share the types of experiences or to know them. So, it's different when I'm talking to another human being. If I'm talking to Philip, we're similar enough systems that there's an ability to kind of share and see and understand intuitively that there is a conscious experience happening there. And I think the further we are away, there's a very interesting scientist, Sarah Walker, who describes this. She's not talking about consciousness, she's talking about life, but we've now had many conversations about this where she thinks her theory might actually apply to consciousness and we might be talking about the same thing. But she works on something called assembly theory, and she talks about life being structures through time, and we only see them one slice at a time, but that they're actually structures in time. And that really maps on very well to the way I see things. If I'm explaining them well at all right now, I have no idea, but I'm writing an article about this that will come out in a couple of months.
Oh, it's absolutely fascinating. I've just got back from a conference in the US with Sarah Walker, actually, and
Oh, how wonderful.
we were going over these things.
I love
Organized
her.
by Paul Davies, the physicist. Paul Davies gets a lot of interesting people
I was
together.
invited and I couldn't go, which
All
is
right.
such a shame.
We couldn't better.
I'm especially disappointed now knowing that you were there. Okay,
But
another time.
yeah, but here we might start to get a little bit of disagreement. I'm not sure. I was
Okay.
worried we were agreeing too much. I mean, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if we don't disagree, because we'll bring Keith in a moment and we'll definitely get some agreement there. But So this is, I mean, this links, I think, to your interesting one of your interesting contributions to these discussions, Annaka, your proposed solution to what is generally seen as the biggest problem for panpsychism, the so-called combination problem, which there's a lot of ways of making more precise, but the basic idea is how do little conscious things
Mm,
come together to make
mm,
the big conscious thing that is the human or the animal brain, how
mhm.
it's all very well postulating, okay, consciousness goes all the way down to the fundamental level, but how do those very rudimentary conscious things come together to make our consciousness? And
Right.
you kindly wrote an article for the book Is Consciousness Everywhere, which was a collection of essays responding to my work. And
Mhm.
your solution to this, which very much links to what you just said, is to deny the existence of selves or subjects. And if there is just a consciousness and forms of consciousness, and rather than these self-like receptacles of consciousness, then maybe this problem just goes away.
Yeah.
But let me just
I wouldn't
this
say
is
I wouldn't say I deny the phenomenon of a self. And I can be a little clear about that if you want me to. What my point is that um, it's an illusion in terms of the information we think that phenomenon is giving us about the underlying reality.
so that's really interesting. So to tell me if you agree with this. I
Okay.
think this will tell me if you agree with this. It seems to me when I attend to my conscious experience
Yeah.
at a given moment, I'm not talking about across
Mm,
time, at a given
mm,
moment, that there's a deep unity among
mm,
my experiences.
mm,
I'm experiencing lots of different things, colors,
mm.
sounds, smells, tastes,
Yeah.
but these don't seem to come in sort of isolated packets. Rather,
Ah.
they come as aspects of a single unified experience. Now,
Mm,
I would assume
mhm.
that you also enjoy this deep unity to your consciousness, that your experiences are unified in
I
this
see it
way.
differently, and
But
yeah,
but
so
but
you go ahead,
just
yeah.
just so just finish the point. So I would assume that your experiences are also come in this unified package,
Mhm,
but if we consider your experiences and mine together, they don't form a sort of unified set.
mm,
So crucially, I'm not talking about a self across time, but it
mhm,
seems to me that my experiences considered in isolation and your experiences considered in isolation and Keith's experiences
mm,
all enjoy this deep unity. So
mm,
isn't that still, if that's right, and I think maybe
mm,
you're about to disagree, but if that's right, then we surely need there's a sort of challenge there to
mm,
explain how conscious experiences come to be unified in this way.
mm. So, okay, I have many things to say about this. First of all, I don't totally agree, with, the observation that we are experiencing all of these things at one time. And this has become clear to many meditators. I did an interview with Joseph Goldstein, the meditation teacher, for my series, to talk about this very subject, because I don't have the experience that he has, but the feeling I was getting after sitting a long meditation retreat, the experience I was having, felt like a realization. And this is something you can have many types of insights and realizations when you meditate for a long time, because you're gaining this skill and this level of concentration of paying better attention to your moment to moment experience than you ever would in your normal life, or that any human would be led to. It's something that is not natural for us. It's something we don't normally do. And so it's almost like, we know neurologically that we have a blind spot. It's almost like if you paid close attention, you could actually see it. There are lots of things like that, where when you pay close attention, you realize, oh, I can see how I'm confused most of the time about the way I'm perceiving things. And time is very interesting, and consciousness as it relates to time, because the present moment is actually almost impossible to define, right? It goes by so quickly when you're sitting in meditation and all you're doing is being with what is, and you're not following thoughts into the future, to the past. You're simply being with the sound, the sight, the body sensation of the breath. And this is hours and hours, days and days of doing this. You gain a kind of skill that most people don't have. And one of the realizations you have while doing that is, and I learned this from having it myself and then talking to people like Joseph Goldstein and others. It seemed to me that we experience one qualia at a time, and I am not seeing what's in front of me and hearing the bird chirp at the same time, that there's a flickering that happens. So it's almost like a film, right? That they're actually all still images, but when you play them quickly enough, you have this illusion that it's all in one moment. But when you can pay close enough attention, and first of all, you get down to what the actual present moment is, and it's very mysterious because it's very hard to know. Like time can, in a sense, disappear. Our typical sense of time can disappear because there is no way to say, okay, it's now. It's not like our brains just can't actually get to the present moment because it moves so quickly to the next one. Anyway, so it's a very interesting exercise. I highly recommend it. I'm really gonna push hard for when your kids are a little older. I'm gonna push hard for you to sort of 10-day meditation retreat. But so I think we are mistaken about the extent to which all of the different qualia are included in one moment. What I think is really happening is one qualia, one little bubble at a time is popping in the universe. And again, based on the structure, some of these qualia get connected through time. And so imagine a split brain patient, right? You could be a split brain patient where it's conceivable, there's some controversy around this, but I think we could all agree that it's conceivable. There's a part of your brain that has been completely disconnected from the rest of your brain, and it's hearing what I'm saying, and it's going, this is something I'm coming up with now. Annaka's right, and you're completely unaware of it. I mean, be like being a what is it called? Conjoined twin, where there are actually two brains. That's actually something it's not even controversial. There are two brains in a body. There's one brain is having its experience, the other one isn't. But this could be happening in your own brain right now, where there are many conscious experiences arising and passing away that are not entering this stream of memory, and there would be no way for you or I or anyone to really ever know that. And so, I mean, I think this is even true of panpsychism, right? Or I don't know, I guess it depends on your view, but the way I see it, there are countless conscious experiences arising all the time in the system that is your body. I mean, many in your brain and throughout your body, and they're arising and passing away, and they're just not part of this thread that you're containing in your memory. I think of it almost as I'm just thinking, I've come up with other examples, but the one that's coming to me now is someone who's, I guess it could be a trauma situation. If anyone who's had an experience of feeling extremely unlike themselves, I was thinking of LSD. I mean, you can take a psychedelic drug that causes you to even forget that you're a human being. Like your experience is so different from your normal human experience that there's no sense of being an I or having a name or being able to speak or any of that. But, I've had those experiences. I'm now here. I remember those experiences. Was that not me? I mean, it's interesting to talk about. There's this kind of like intellectual trick that we think, or we like to think about what it would be like to be someone else. Or I do this with my cats all the time. I think I wish I could just be my cat for 30 seconds. I just want to know what that perspective is like. I want to know what it's like to be my cat. And the truth is that question doesn't make any sense. But the way I could have that experience is if there were, and there may be some future technology that makes this possible. If there were some way to get whatever the neurons are doing in the cat's brain in that moment, if there were some way to implant that an experience of 5 minutes of my cat into my stream of memory, I would have a memory of being the cat in the same way that I have a memory of being on acid that is totally unlike any experience I've ever had, right? It's just in my memory. And it's in your, and it's, there's the long-term memory, but there's also memory in every moment. I mean, it's just, if I didn't remember the last 5 seconds, this, would be a very different situation. And it doesn't mean there's no self that would disappear. There just would no longer be that structure of memories connected over time, of qualia and having access to it. But there could be all kinds of qualia arising in your brain right now that are there, that are not part of you, that you don't count as you because you
Right.
don't remember them, or yeah. I mean, I would say that you don't remember them.
That's fascinating. So we should bring Keith in, but so I suppose just by, I mean, I do admit that, yeah, if it is the case that that the simplest experiences never unify into complex bundles that
Sure.
at a time, it's just memory that's bundling them together across time. I think that I think that does completely remove the combination problem. I suppose
Right.
I find it difficult to believe, but that might be because I haven't meditated enough. But anyway, Keith has been waiting very patiently, listening to these two
Yes, I'm
wild
afraid. I'm going to get my pen
enthusiasts.
out. I'm getting ready for the arguments. Yeah.
So, God, tell us why this is BS, Keith. I was
Well,
joking.
well,
He's nice, really.
maybe my right hemisphere here is nodding agreement with all of this, but my left one wants to articulate a little worry. I can completely see how I completely I think I do anyway understand how panpsychism can seem plausible. In fact, I think that given a certain starting point, thinking about consciousness, it's a natural way to go. I've actually got a paper in which I argue that if you start with a certain way of conceptualizing consciousness, essentially as something irreducibly subjective, it's something that no account of structures and processes and mechanisms or whatever in the brain, sensory mechanisms, reactive mechanisms, all this stuff. If you have the idea that it's something distinct from all that, it's something that whereas though they are public, there is this inner life that's essentially subjective, that is only accessible from the first person perspective. If you conceptualize consciousness in that way, then yes, you definitely have a hard problem, because how do you make this transition from a description of some public structure to the inner life of the thing? How do you get a new world, as it were, to open up inside a physical structure? If that's what it needs for consciousness, a new world to open up, an irreducibly subjective aspect of coming to existence, then absolutely you have a hard problem. Absolutely.
Can I ask you a question there? Can I ask you a question just so I can understand?
Sure, absolutely, yes.
Let me think of an example. If you imagine there's a AI robot dog that someone just created, right? And we don't know if it's conscious or not. It might be. I don't know where this is coming from, but so there are two possible realities. There's this dog that barks and whines, and but we know it's human made and doesn't have a brain. Seems like a dog, and there's one circumstance where it is having a felt experience. There is a felt experience entailed in that processing. And there's the other, which is more in line with our intuitions, which is it's still just a computer. It doesn't have any experience, right? My question is, what is the difference between those two realities for you? And what would you call it?
Well,
what is the thing that's missing in the robot that does not have felt experience?
I wouldn't conceptualize it as the presence or absence of something irreducibly subjective, as is there an irreducibly subjective aspect to this creature's existence that we can never know about from the outside? I wouldn't conceptualize consciousness in that way.
No, I wouldn't either, actually. Yeah.
And then, so there isn't, the question is, we need to work out, I'm not denying consciousness. I mean, I'm conscious right now. I have conscious experiences. The question is, what's happening when you have a conscious experience? Let's say pain. Yeah. Pain's absolutely real.
But also, what is the difference between a physical system that has it and one that doesn't?
Well, it depends what it is that that you're asking about. What is
Yeah.
this thing that whose presence or absence we're
Okay.
unsure about? If
Okay.
it's
I'll
something
let you finish. Yeah.
irreducibly subjective, then no science will never tell you whether it's present, because
Mhm.
science
Mhm.
it's a public third person enterprise. It will
Mhm.
never penetrate into an irreducibly subjective. But what, and I grant you that when we introspect,
Mm.
it seems to us like there is this private, essentially private, irreducibly subjective world. But what if that is a sort of illusion created by processes of introspective monitoring? You see,
Yeah.
I don't
No,
think
I
we
think
have
yeah.
that kind of. I think we're evolved biological organisms, so all our knowledge is the product of some sort of, if you like, sensory systems, including
Sure.
interoceptive systems, introspective systems, and these are not guaranteed to be reliable. They're not guaranteed to be free
Absolutely.
from distortion.
I
And this
agree.
goes for our knowledge of our own minds too. So
Mhm.
our introspective systems are saying to us, look, there's this irreducibly subjective world in here that it's just you just can't get a grip on in terms of function or any sort of physical process. That's what our
Yeah. Yeah.
introspective is. But maybe
Well, I guess I
maybe
wonder
it is.
what it is you do, what you would call that, and what you see the difference between that existing or not existing. Because
Well,
I think we might actually completely agree. I'm not sure, but what I do agree with you about is that um, every experience can be said to be an illusion in the sense that it's giving us a false picture of the underlying reality, um, when they're kind of causing us to feel as if we have this perfect window onto it. So it's this very strong illusion.
including
But I
perfect
don't,
window onto our own minds. Yes.
yes, of course. But I don't think you can say that the consciousness itself is an illusion. Um, that
No.
you can't say those felt experiences don't exist in the universe, which I don't think you are saying. So the experiences themselves clearly exist. The felt experience is something that exists in the universe exactly as it is in the moment it's being experienced, right? And
Well,
so
it exists, but
it
I don't
exists.
necessarily know what it is.
Of course.
I need
No.
science to tell me what it is.
Yes, I
I can't
agree.
say, so I can't infer from that, look,
But
science
it
can't
is, but there's kind but if you say it's something that arises at a certain point, if it's not everywhere, if it doesn't exist in everything, then that has to come up at some point in processing, and then you end up with this kind of dualism that I just can't subscribe to, and that's where I get stuck.
well, look,
Because
sorry,
if it exists, if those conscious experiences that we agree exist in the universe, even though they're illusions in the sense that they're not giving us correct information about the world, they just are the experiences. The world could be anything, but we know the experiences. I can, I can say this, gripping my pen, right? The feeling, the sensation here, that happened in the universe, right? That experience exists in the universe of gripping my pen, whatever the situation actually turns out to be, whatever the physical laws and structure and whatever it all turns out to be. The experience that I am having of gripping this pencil, that is an experience that is now in the past, that we existed in the universe. So the question is, if that type of thing is possible in the universe, why is it that it's not associated with everything? And if it arises at some point, you're talking about dualism, because it's no longer something that can be described from the outside. And I don't think it's being experienced by a self or by an entity. I just think it arises in and of itself.
I
And
think
in
this
and
goes,
of itself, it doesn't have something that is available anywhere but from in and of itself. And if there are
I,
systems that have it and other systems that don't, um, you're kind of committing yourself to this dualism where it's kind of it's strange, but I think it becomes a more new age view, which is how I talked myself out of it. Is it seemed like, okay, then I'm actually committing to a magical thing that doesn't exist in the universe, but then it magically shows up.
I think from my perspective, you're taking, you're still got the the starting point that what you're still taking the starting point that I want to resist taking, which is that we know what the experience is in and of itself, that we have some sort of direct, immediate
We don't know
revelatory.
anything. We don't know anything except that it exists.
What
It,
exists?
the feeling.
What do you mean by the feeling? Is there something? Do you know what the feeling is?
Yeah,
Could the feeling just be nothing, literally nothing more than a pattern of activity in a certain region of your brain? Could it just be that?
absolutely. And I
So
think that is what I think when that is what it is, but it all has to be part of the same thing. Otherwise, you're stuck in a magical dualism world.
so you could be wrong about.
It's just
I
we
mean,
don't
I
know
could,
we don't know the felt sensation of everything else that
but
is being
I don't
processed.
have infallible access to what's happening in my brain.
Sure.
I mean, so if it is just if there's just a certain pattern of brain activity there,
Yeah.
I might my introspective mechanisms might mislead me as to whether or not it's there. The experience might be there, but my introspective mechanisms might not pick
Right.
up on it.
But I'm
Whereas,
saying we can't know anything about the physical world, but we can know about experiences that arise.
but if the experience just is a pattern of brain activity, then it is
Yeah.
part of the physical world. So we
Yes.
can.
Yes.
So how can
And
we
that's
know
how
that part of the?
that's how I've come to my view is the physical
Hmm.
world and the experiences are all part of the same thing.
Yeah, I'm guessing. So do you think
So
then
it
that
is it is a brand new, unlike any other thing. If nothing has it, but then you get a brain, and then suddenly we're not just sitting with physical processes, but we're sitting with felt experiences arising in the universe, you've entered some sort of magical dualism that
Hmm.
doesn't seem
So
right to me.
but then if it just is a pattern of brain activity, there's no mystery about how that there's no hard problem.
There
We
is
just
there's activity in this paper right now, and I mean, the universe is nothing but activity, and so why we think that type of thing that doesn't exist anywhere else, there's no reason for it to come into being. I think the evolution argument is
well,
flawed. That if we can't, I mean, you have to then come up with a reason for why you're talking about it as an additional property that comes into being. Why would that be? And so then, most people, most scientists will have this evolutionary argument. Well, feeling something changes the behavior. It's causal. And so if we feel it, then we act differently. We're able to do all these other things. But the truth is, we don't really have any evidence for that. We could build an AI that can do everything a human can do, but may have no felt experiences associated with it. There's no
but
good reason.
yes, but if the felt
And
experience just is a pattern of brain activity, if that's all it is, there's nothing more to it. Then if we've told an evolutionary story about how that pattern of brain activity evolved, that kind of
well, you
just.
have to say why there's this additional element
Well, it's
beyond
that additional
the
element
physical.
then it is more than just a
Well, but
pattern
it
of
is
brain
an
activity.
additional element because you're saying you could see two dog robots. One has an internal experience, one doesn't. Those are two different states of the universe. You're talking about another thing. You are talking about consciousness. You are pointing to the felt experience as being in addition to the physical system. It's not
But
just the physical system.
that's what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that's an illusion generated by our processes of introspective self-monitoring. We
But
monitor states of our brains.
the only thing we know is that felt experience exists.
Ah,
It's
well,
the
that's
only thing
no,
we can
that
know.
epistemic foundationalism, I'm definitely not on board with. No,
Yeah.
I don't think we have. I don't think evolution has equipped us with that sort of epistemic foundational. I mean, where would these? How would this not? How would we have developed mechanisms for generating infallible knowledge, getting us that sort of thing about ourselves? It seems our knowledge of ourselves, of our own minds, our own experiences, can be as
I'm
fallible as anything
saying
else.
everything we understand is compatible with being brains in a vat, is compatible with being simulation in somebody else's computer. Is like know we can't have firsthand understanding of anything. The one thing that I can know in the purest sense of the term is that I am feeling something.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be wrong about everything else, and I might never know. I don't think I will ever know how that experience comes into being.
Could.
I believe in evolution. I believe evolution
Mhm.
is a process, and it's part of the structure of consciousness. But I think I'm actually really in line with Donald Hoffman's work here. I
Right.
really believe evolution has led us to have a completely false view of what the ultimate nature of
But
reality is.
how is it led us evolution, the same evolutionary process led us have a completely infallible view of our own experience?
I wouldn't call it infallible. It just is what it is. That's the definition of it, is the experience itself. There's nothing more.
Oh,
There's no analyzing to do. There's no, I mean, you could be, I could be sitting
any
in, yeah.
any claim we make about it is a knowledge claim. If we say
Well,
that
but I
like
had to
this or like
communicate
that,
to you, I have to make a claim about it. But when I'm not, if I'm just sitting in meditation and I'm feeling the air go in at my nose and not even having the concept of nose, it's just that there's a feeling of, I have to describe it in some way to you, but even without the words. But what you can picture this yourself. If you're sitting and you're feeling the air go in your nostrils and you're feeling your chest rise without any of these concepts, right? It's just feeling, feeling, feeling. That's all there is. There's actually nothing else. And it,
well,
if
this
there,
is a sort of, I guess, a sort of Cartesian perspective where you
anything
take.
else we want to know is an interpretation of something. It's not a
Well,
direct
I
knowing.
think everything's an interpretation, including our claims that we make about our own minds, our own experience. I think those are interpretation too. I agree with Donald that evolution has uh, 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 provides us with the kinds of knowledge we need to survive and so on. And I think exactly the same goes for our knowledge about our own minds, our own experiences. The things we say about our own experience, about what it's like to be us, is itself the product of evolved evolutionary mechanisms, and is likely to be a selective and distorting. And it's certainly not likely to be a reliable guide to the deep nature of fundamental reality. Why would
Yes,
evolution have equipped us with an insight into the fundamental nature of reality,
right.
of what quarks are made of? Evolution's
Yeah,
got no interest in telling us what
no,
quarks are made of.
I agree. But
So
you're still wanting to smuggle in another um, property that doesn't exist in many places of the universe, but exists where there are brains. And it's
no, I'm not. I'm wanting to smuggle in brains alone and nothing. Brains doing their brainy
right.
stuff and
So why
nothing
would
else.
you assume? Why would you assume that brains do this and pennies don't?
Because brains have all kinds of sensitivities that amount to what we call consciousness.
Right, but we have zero evidence. So we can only know that conscious experiences exist where they can communicate their experiences
No,
to
I don't
us.
think so. We
We
just look for similarities and patterns of sensitivity and reactivity, which is what consciousness is. We
we
better.
don't know that that's what consciousness is, though.
No, that's the hypothesis that I'm proposing. That there's another perspective on this. That you don't have to start with a conception of consciousness that gives rise to a hard problem.
I
That you can
think when
think
you
of.
look at where our assumptions are about what consciousness is and how it arises in brains, you find that we're really basing our assumptions on a lot of false intuitions we have based on the fact that we have human brains and we've been given these false intuitions.
I would be
And
inclined to agree with that. Yes, yes,
yeah.
yes. I would definitely. I think
Um,
that it's present in.
and so our idea that consciousness is complex and only arises in brains comes out of these silly human intuitions. I mean, you know, and I do think there's kind of a revolution probably coming where it's similar to a lot of the other scientific revolutions where we're no longer the center of the universe, where it's not, and that consciousness is, and I think consciousness is special. I was about to say it's not special, but I don't think it's special in the sense that only human beings have it. We've just assumed
No,
that because we can
I
only
agree with
talk to each other.
that. I agree with that.
Gravity is very special, but not only human beings have gravity.
No,
And I
I
think
agree with
the idea
that.
that this assumption we've made that consciousness is a very complex thing, that only human beings and these kind of higher order creatures in this false
No,
hierarchy, we have no evidence for that. It could be the most basic thing in the world. It could just be everywhere. And we don't have
no, no,
every
no,
reason we try to give for it being causal at the behavioral level doesn't work. I mean, there are lots of all the behaviors, we can explain all the behaviors without it. And
I
so
don't think you can. I don't think you can explain pain behavior without mentioning pain. I think I think pain is.
you don't think we're
That's
going
why
to
pain.
create
I think
robots that
that's why.
exhibit
I think that's why pain evolved, or pain
Why?
mechanisms
Okay,
evolved
so good.
to
Okay,
teach
why?
us
Why?
to teach us to survive, to keep us away from things that are
So
dangerous to us.
you don't think a system could learn to survive without pain?
I think that if it learned, if it had the pain mechanism, the kind of pain sensitivities and the pain reactive dispositions that we have, it would have pain. I think that's what pain is: a complex set of sensitivities and reactive dispositions.
So you're convinced that if we build AI that is sufficiently human-like, that expresses pain and does a work, basically on the outside, you can't tell the difference. The behaviorally, this AI
Not on the
robot,
outside, no, but I mean, it would have to replicate.
you don't think it could take care of itself as well? Or it would, the moment it started taking care of itself as well as we take care of ourselves, you would say that is conscious? It couldn't do that
No,
without
no, it would have to
consciousness?
be doing it in much the same way that we are doing it, with the same kind of patterns of sensitivities and
Okay, so
but there's going to be
but
lots of
why? That
different
makes no
dimensions.
sense. That's just because, well, that you're saying that's the way I do it, so that's the way it has to be done. But
No, I think it could be.
it's just an
We could have.
assumption. You just, because you just said pain is useful in
Hmm.
that it gives us these certain behaviors of avoiding things, and we couldn't do it without it. But and then I give you an example of a system that could avoid things and take care of itself just fine, maybe even better than we can without
No,
it.
I didn't say that pain was just the overt behavior. I said pain is a cluster of psychological
Right,
sensitivity.
but it has to affect behavior for it to be evolutionarily
Of course,
advantageous
not
and
thing
for it
wouldn't be
to.
selected for if it wasn't. It didn't have some advantage.
Right, but I'm saying what's the there I don't think there's a clear advantage. I think we can create robots that take just as good care of themselves as we do and who run away from danger and who do all the things they need to do, maybe even do it better than we do, and they don't have to feel pain.
Well, you could probably do it in different ways. Certainly, I'm not
Right.
saying that
So
that's
why
not
did it
possible,
have to?
but because it took the way that
You're
it
adding
had
an
been out, that it
additional
gave these
piece of
sensations.
it
It's called pain.
feeling, you're saying the behavior that causes us to avoid, the evolutionary behavior that causes us to avoid getting harmed has to have a felt sensation in order for it to be as effective
No,
as
I'm
it
not
is.
saying that. No, at all.
You're
I'm
not?
saying that pain is a cluster, a complex cluster of
But you're saying it's
sensitivities and
necessary
reactivities.
for something.
I'm saying that pain, when we talk about pain, if
Yeah,
you ask, when I take a case when I'm in pain, what's happening there? Look at what's happening there. Study it, study it at the neuroscientific level.
sure.
That's what pain is. It's that state that I'm in then.
I agree. I agree. It's completely,
That's it.
it is the
It's
same
not
thing as the
something
physical thing we observe.
it's
But
not something extra,
y-
private, in
yeah,
addition to all that. It just
I
is that.
think you're
And
claiming
then
that there is something extra without
I'm not.
realizing it.
That's what I think is an illusion.
Then
That's
what is
precisely.
then what is needed? If there are systems that could do it could do all of this without pain,
I'm
then
not saying there are.
the,
There could be systems that could display the overt behavior of pain without having that complex of
yeah,
sensitivities inside them.
yeah,
But if they replicated those to a sufficiently,
yeah.
fine-grained detail, then yeah, there'd be pain, because that's what pain is. I mean, there's going to be a complex gradation here on multiple dimensions
But
in
there's
which.
something about the feeling it that you think is necessary for that processing, that processing has to
No,
entail the feeling
I
of it.
don't. It's this idea of conceptualizing it in the first person way as an essence of feeling that I'm resisting. I'm saying that is our way of talking about a complex physical process. What's happening is just the physical process. This talk about the essence of the feeling, the what its likeness, is our way of conceptualizing that. But that's just our our human way of talking about it. It's not
And
an insight into the fundamental nature of the thing.
okay, so but does everything have that then? Does every
No,
processing in the world
no,
have that
absolutely not.
element? No.
No, only things that are similar and some, relatively similar in some dimensions to what we have.
There's no good reason for why that would be.
Why? What would be?
Why some would have felt experience and others wouldn't.
Well, because some would have these relevantly similar clusters of sensitivities and reactive dispositions, and some wouldn't. It's got to. I mean, you could
I
go
think
right
you're just
down the scale to animals who have very minimal forms of it, but once you have no sensitivity to the outside world and no disposition to react to it, then there's nothing that's at all similar to pain.
right, but nothing has no sensitivity to the outside world. I mean, there really is no outside world at the heart of
And
it.
it
It's
just
all
shades.
just one world moving
Well,
and
it just shades off. I mean, well, you can you get down to the level of, you're not going to get it below the level of an organism that has interest and a boundary and some, a sort of, boundary between itself and the rest of the world. Once you get past that, you're not going to have anything. But
yeah.
from there, you build up
I
gradually.
mean, there's a yeah.
Um, but I don't think, I just don't see why evolution would have equipped us with an insight into fundamental reality. Why would it have done that?
Yeah, I don't see why evolution would have equipped us with
But
with feeling.
panpsychism, well, so maybe it didn't.
Right.
Maybe it equipped us with something else that we misconceptualize as this essence of feeling.
I think feeling is the least conceptualized thing there is, and we just have no way of talking about it without concepts. Because, and I think this may change in the future, actually, by the way. I think there may be ways to share qualia between systems that will really help us make progress here. The only method we have for that now is language, and language is really,
That's
really
certainly true.
limited.
Yeah,
We're
I'm certainly
so limited in how we can have these
But I think
conversations.
that neuroscience is going to help that in
Yeah.
the way that, say, Paul Churchland suggests. I think there's a lot of
Mm.
anyway. Look, I'm not saying that that this must be correct. I just want to try and put another option on the table that to question I think we can question that starting point. The question is really, suppose
So
we
what
were just
is your starting point? Yeah, your starting point is
well, my starting point is that we have that I have these states, okay, which I call conscious experiences. Okay, I have pains, I see colors and things and so on, and I have these. Something's happening there. Okay, I don't know what it is really. I'm tempted to say all sorts of things about it, like it's kind of mysterious. That I know for sure what it is because it's the only thing that's immediately presented to me somehow, to myself, that I'm more sure of it than of anything else in the world, that it's only I know what it's really like, that it presents a hard problem, and so on, so on, so on, so on. Those are things I'm inclined to say about my experiences. What I'm suggesting is maybe those things are a distortion of what is really happening. And I'm inclined to say them because of introspective mechanisms of introspective monitoring and modeling that present essentially my brain activity to me in a certain way, courtesy of evolved mechanisms that lead me then to make all these philosophical claims about the nature of my experience, and to take those claims as certain foundations for theorizing about the nature of reality and doing metaphysics. I can say maybe we shouldn't take them. Maybe we should try and unpack the mechanisms, the introspective mechanisms that lead me to say those things. And if we do, maybe our sense that there's a hard problem at all will dissipate. And we'll say, well, no, actually, it's just the way we self-monitor.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that, except for the fact that I don't see any reason for there to be a felt experience associated with any processing in the universe at all. And I think it makes more sense that it's associated with all processing than just some processing.
But it's the felt experience bit, that concept, that I'm suggesting might be a product of this mechanism, that is illusory, this notion of immediately felt.
I mean, it's illusory in what it tells us about the world. I don't think you can say it's illusory in the sense that it doesn't exist. I don't think you can deny that it exists, and I don't think you do. And so I think it's confusing to call it an illusion, because it's when you get down to consciousness itself, you can say every experience we have is an illusion in the sense that it gives us false information about the underlying reality. But to say the feeling is an illusion makes people think you're saying it doesn't. You're deluded about the fact that it happened at all, that there's an experience present.
Well, something happened. I mean, but what might have happened may have had no essentially first person.
No, but I'm just talking about the experience itself.
Well, I'm talking about the experience too. But I'm saying the experience may just be nothing more than a pattern.
But that's another level to it. Then I mean, all we have access to is the experience itself.
That's what I'm denying.
Okay.
That I don't think we have that sort of revelatory access to an aspect of reality, of any aspect of reality. I think.
Okay. I still actually think we agree. We just don't have the semantic.
I think we agree on a lot.
Oh,
we agree on a lot, but we must.
You don't want us to agree? Okay, I disagree.
every time we have a guest on, I think
you're
going to agree with me, and then Keith ends up saying, "Oh no, you agree with me actually." I think we do disagree.
Okay.
But I'm not sure I can articulate it better.
Should we? I'm wondering whether we should skip free will and the self.
we brought those in a bit. We brought those in into
we did. Yeah. I mean,
How
Maybe
about we do
free
this?
will. We should talk a bit about that, perhaps, because we haven't talked that with the self has come in quite a bit.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. We talked more
Do
about
you
the
want to?
self and less about free will.
Do you want to just raise free will, and then I've got some questions for Annaka off Twitter as well. So do you want to ask a question about free will, Keith, and then
Yeah, I mean, I you see now free will. You see, I think your perspective on free will is like you think free will is a sort of illusion. So you take a view, I suppose,
Yeah, I mean, I
closer
would.
to my
I'm
one.
very careful to distinguish between what I call free will and conscious will, because I think
Ah,
free will is a process in nature, is decision making is a process in nature that exists, and we can talk
mhm,
about it, and there's a lot there to be talked about. We can, talk about how much freedom there is in any system, and how permeable it is to its environment, and how there may be 20 different ways it can react to one stimulus, and
yeah,
talking about plant behaviors,
yeah.
incredibly interesting. And I just interviewed the author of a new book that you would both find fascinating, and you should read, and all of your audience should read too. It is called The Light Eaters, by Zoe Schlanger. It's the newest. It's the newest plant behavior research.
Mhm,
Most of it I
mhm,
hadn't even heard of. Studies from 2023, the most recent stuff.
mhm, mhm.
But anyway, there's a study that's not that new, but I think it was a pea seedling, and it's in one of those Y. What do they call it? Like a Y vessel. So the roots can grow in either direction, and they play the sound of running water at one end, and not at the other, and the roots grow toward, so there are many cues from the environment, in many different plants, where they have to make decisions about which is the
Mhm.
best path for them, which is where the light's coming from, whether to warn their fellow sagebrush that there's a predator nearby, like caterpillars are coming, whatever it is, right? They're It's very hard to predict exactly what any particular plant will do in any circumstance, because it's an incredibly
Mhm.
complex set of processes that are taking place. I think there's a way in which we can view those processes as having freedom.
Yep.
I would say that when it comes down to it, there's no real freedom in there. And the thing that's an illusion, that I think the illusion we have, is not that we're not making decisions and there are all these complex processes taking place, but that the feeling is that there's a self that is, I think most people equate with consciousness. Their consciousness is their self, and that is the thing that ultimately has this ultimate freedom. And I fall victim to this as well. So, like I have a feeling right now that, like, I don't know how to do it, but I could leave my body. That, like, this is my body, and I'm in here
Mhm.
somewhere, and there's a me, and that me, I'm making free decisions all the time.
Yeah.
And so I think, our brains are a much more complex version of the pea deciding
Yep. Yep.
which way to send their roots. And so it's all a process in nature that's unfolding. I don't think you
Yep.
can ever reverse the tape and play it differently. And so I don't think there's real freedom to be found there. But of course, there are these, interesting, complex decision-making
Yep.
processes that, from some angle, we could, watch the whole thing play out and know exactly how it would play out. But I don't know that there's any point in the universe that has access to all that information. Yeah.
I think it's absolutely. I mean, having disagreed with you over the previous thing, I'm fully on
Okay.
board with this. I think one way to do it is to sort of think about free will with a capital
Yes.
W, as something that
Yes.
could really intervene in the world from outside.
Right. We feel we
As it were.
have that, and that's an illusion.
Exactly. But free will with a small f and a
Yes.
small w. And I kind of want, I mean, of course, some people do, looking here a bit at Philip, do take free will in that strong metaphysical sense seriously, and think that
Yes.
even that
Most
might
people.
extend down to, and some people even have panagentialism views, looking at
Mm,
Philip here, which says that even atoms might have a sort of free will of that.
yeah.
And I'm absolutely with you on that. And I kind of just want to do the same thing for consciousness.
Mm,
Instead of consciousness being something that's outside the public world and somehow
yeah.
mysteriously
But that's what I'm
associated
trying
with
to
it.
convince you of. That's why I think we agree. We feel like we're trying to convince each other of the same thing. There's something interesting going on.
But what I think that, well, what's the difference is, I think that I think that what it is in the public world is just certain evolved mechanisms of
Right. Well, I
sensitivity.
don't, yeah.
That's what
I mean, that's
the
where we're going to go in
experience is.
circles again, but I think there's no reason
Yeah,
to believe it.
but it's a similar move, though, I think, because it's interesting that you make that move for free will, and I think
Yeah.
probably for the self. You're prepared to, not the big self, but maybe some sort of small self to do with
Yeah,
memory.
no, I mean, you think I'm committing myself to dualism, and I think you're committing yourself to dualism. There's some, but I actually think
I've never been
I
accused
think
of
we
that before.
probably agree, and there's like, it's very hard to communicate the perspective from which we're coming to the same conclusion.
It's interesting. I'd certainly, everything you said about free will, having been
Yeah.
grumpy and disagree with you about, I think everything you said about
Yeah.
free will, right from the P and everything, I was
Yeah.
just, yeah, absolutely.
Great. I love it.
And so, yeah.
No, it's all that
I don't know
argument.
where
It's
Philip
that
is on that.
argument that leads me to believe that consciousness is fundamental, believe it or not.
But that
So
doesn't lead you to believe that free will is fundamental, and the analogy would help.
No,
Anyway,
there is no
Philip
free
does think
will.
that, you know.
It's just
Philip does.
processes playing out in nature, and underneath it, all those processes are at bottom. What they are is felt experience.
Yeah, that's a bit I don't go with. Anyway, but
I know.
Philip on free will.
One day.
on free will. I mean, I think Annaka and I have had this argument before. Well, I wonder, Annaka, actually, how, to the extent that you're skeptical of capital F free will and capital
Yeah.
W, I guess, as well,
Yeah.
is that based on, to what extent is that based on meditation, or to what extent is that based on neuroscience? To what extent is that
All of
based
it.
on
They all converge.
philosophical
They
argument?
all
So
arrows
the thing,
point in the same direction.
I'm
But
just
meditation is, I mean, this would be a very interesting exercise for you, because it becomes viscerally clear that the free will, the capital free will that we feel we have, it is a tool by which you can break through that. And it really is like exposing any other illusion where you realize my experience is not what I thought it was.
But I mean,
Because,
there are
yeah,
Buddhist monks who have, meditated for many decades, who do still believe in free will. I mean, it's not
you'd
like the
have to be
entire Buddhist.
specific there. I mean, it depends on what they may be talking about. Lowercase free will, they may be talking about other beliefs that I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, there are definitely, Buddhism. Meditation is usually seated in a religion of some sort or another, and I would say that Buddhism is more a philosophy than a religion, but there are also some beliefs about things that I would definitely not agree on, and I wouldn't say that meditation is a window onto complete understanding of the universe. You can still believe in forces of gods and reincarnation and souls, and there's a lot there that I wouldn't agree with, but I think those people do have a realization, the type of realization I'm talking about. And it doesn't stop you from talking about free will in many other forms, but the one we walk around with, a feeling that there is a total freedom, in a sense, at some point to go one way or another, that stands outside of the physical world, I think is just a pure illusion. And you see it
So
when you're watching your moment-to-moment experience. You feel that you just see things happening. Everything happens. A desire comes into being, a belief comes into being, a thought comes into being, a sound comes into being. There is, from the perspective of conscious awareness, the thoughts arise in the same way that the sounds arise. There
I
is no
wonder whether
you in control of all of it.
I wonder whether, though, it could be a little bit like the you think the light's always on in the refrigerator because it's on when you open it. So I mean, I take it that if there is such a thing as free will with a capital F, it's going to be exhibited in moral dilemmas, or when you're really deliberating on something. It's not going to occur when you're meditating on your experience. And
You
so
can
maybe
you
it's
can
just
have moral
when you're
insights and make big
meditating.
decisions about your life while you're meditating.
Right,
You can watch your mind make a decision.
right.
Right.
Whilst you're
You
I
can
agree with
be
you.
deliberating.
aware.
I
Yeah.
agree with
But maybe
I'm with you there.
maybe when
There's no
you
you
do that.
making that you're not behind the brain, like cranking the brain, churning out the decisions. They just
Well,
happen.
here's a hypothesis that when you do attend to your experience, that is somewhat incompatible with capital F free will, right? It's those very moments where you're reflectively attending to your experience that you're not going to be
I can
making capital F
experience the
free,
illusion of free will while I'm meditating.
right? So
I can
okay,
watch
what's
the process can be experienced, but I just see I have different beliefs at the other side of that process
so it's
about what
difficult.
just
It's
happened.
obviously it's difficult to debate, what comes up in meditation, and
Yeah,
I am
no, we
somewhat
don't have to. I
I
and
am
forget
yeah,
about
yeah.
that. It's
I
more
but
just
just
like where it's more just the philosophy of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
When you
coming
make
to
a
that, I mean,
decision, what is happening?
so
Are
coming to the, I'm somewhat agnostic about capital F free will.
okay.
What I am not convinced by is specifically the philosophical arguments against capital F free will. So
Mm.
a lot of people say, well, if our decisions had no prior causes, then they'd just be kind of random, arbitrary, meaningless. It'd be like
Oh,
the
they have
random
prior
decay
causes.
of a radio. Yeah, but for capital F free will people, they don't, right?
Oh, I
That's
see
the
what you're saying. If they
definition of,
when they
yeah.
believe that, yes.
So this is a way of in which people reject capital F free will. You know what philosophers call libertarian free will, as you know, Annaka. That if they didn't have prior causes or decisions, then it would just be kind of random, arbitrary, like the random decay of a radioactive isotope. But I like the response. Philosopher Jonathan Lowe, who was spent influential in academic philosophy, not very well known outside of academic philosophy, spent his career at my university, Durham. But his point was, well, look, even if they lack prior causes, there's an important difference between a free decision and some random
Yeah.
event,
I mean, I think
namely that their decisions are responses to considerations of value, right? So suppose you're,
sure.
and let's just take an example of a moral dilemma. I always give examples of cheating on your partner, but I'm starting to worry my wife's going to get suspicious. So let me think of another moral dilemma, right? Yeah, I'm
Stealing.
coming home from work, and I promised that I'll get home to look after the kids, but it's a hot day and I'm passing the pub, and I'm really craving a beer, right? And I'm
Sure.
wrestling with this decision. Do I keep my promise to my partner to come home and look after the kids, or
Yeah.
do I give in to this great desire? Now to my mind, so there are two considerations here.
Sure.
There's a felt yearning, and then there's a judgment about what I ought to do.
Yeah.
Let's pretend for this, if there is capital F free will, even if the decision has no prior cause, in making that decision I will be responding to one of those two considerations,
Sure.
and that makes it very different to some random event like a quantum mechanical probabilistic
Oh, yeah, yeah. No,
randomness.
these are complex
So
systems in nature. I mean, and I would actually describe the situation you just laid out. I think rather than seeing it as a free decision, it is it's a very complex decision making process. So I would say it's a much more complex version of the P, deciding which way the roots should go, right? Rather than just, oh, there's water on one side and there isn't on the other. Then of course, what the P's values and interests are. It's going to go toward the water, but maybe there's, maybe if it had information that there's an endless supply of water here, um, and there's no water here, but in 5 minutes there will be water here. Or they have to deal with some short term root drowning, but will event and there are things there. I'm making up this example, but there are more complex decisions like this just at the level of plants, where it's not just, oh, there's water there, there's not there, so I'm going to go that way. There are many variables, and with human beings, I mean, the brain is the most complex thing in the universe that we know of, and so the variables are they're just vast, and it's impossible to keep track of all of them. But what is happening in the situation you just described is your brain is going like, should I I'm in a Y, the roots are going to go that way, they're going to go that way. And you're not just processing the immediate gratification, you're processing the larger picture. And that's something brains are set up to do. And it's just a complex decision process that is playing out in nature. And
But now you're assuming no capital F free will. I'm trying to reject the philosophical argument that capital F free will is incoherent, and that argument's supposed to
I think
go.
it is
I
incoherent.
know, but let's.
Oh, am I
Right.
not supposed to argue with you? I'm confused. What's my role?
So yeah. So look, here's the argument. So what's wrong with this response, right? Is this the argument? Is this the argument you go for, right? Either it's got a prior cause or it's just random, right? And I'm suggesting no, there's a middle way here. It's got no prior cause, but it's not random because
Well,
it involves
what
responding
has
to
no prior
value.
cause? Doesn't everything have a prior cause? You don't think it does?
Well, not for the. I don't know. I'm agnostic, but for the person who believes in capital F free will, the certain moments of decision, right, lack a prior cause. So let me put it this way: what's the argument that's incoherent?
I mean, I think
right?
doesn't someone who has a belief in capital F free will think there doesn't have to be a prior cause? Aren't they getting rid of the prior
Exactly. Yeah.
cause?
So
Yeah.
what's incoherent? What's wrong? What's incoherent about capital F free will?
I don't know that we live in a universe that doesn't have prior causes.
So it's
I
like, but
believe we
it's
live
a
in a
science.
universe, a cause and effect universe, at least in terms of how, there may be a perspective from which you can stand where it looks more like a block universe. But as long as we're having an experience of moving through time, one thing happens, another thing happens, and there's nothing that I'm aware of. I've never seen evidence for something coming in from outside the universe and doing whatever it wants and not
Right.
having an
So it's
effect on something that doesn't want it to be affected, that doesn't want to be affected by that thing. I mean, it's a nonsensical, it's not, I mentioned this, I forget, I think it's in my book actually. Joseph Goldstein, the same meditation teacher, I asked him about his view on free will. And he said, it occurred to him once that he likes to sometimes get his mind around how he answers something by first defining the thing that's being asked about. So he thought, okay, how would I define free will? And he found he couldn't define it. How do you define it? What does it mean? There is a will. There's something that exists in the world that is uncoupled from everything else. Is that what free will is? What is free will? I can't even come up with an explanation. It's an illusion we experience. It's not a real thing.
That's very much what I'm inclined to say about consciousness in the strong sense.
Right.
Very
I
much.
know.
That it's just decoupled from everything.
okay.
You see, you're
If
you're
you
so
follow
wrong
me
about this,
long
but
enough,
Annaka's so
follow
right.
me long enough, you'll
Annaka's,
believe that everything is conscious.
Annaka, you're so
So
right about free
close.
will, and Philip is so wrong. But I can't believe you agree with him on the other, on any of the other stuff, because you're so right about free will.
Yeah.
I guess just try one more time and then I'll drop. I don't see what's
This argument about free will will
incoherent.
get you, if you follow it long enough, will get you down the path of realizing that felt experience makes no sense as something that arises out of non-conscious matter.
I don't believe it does.
I know.
Right. Can I ask
No,
one
you
more
do.
thing?
You think it does? No? Oh, no,
No, I
because you don't
don't.
think it's a thing. You don't think it's a thing at
I
all.
don't think it's a thing. I think it's a kind of construct.
Even though
of
you
theoretical
believe that
construct.
the experiences exist in the universe,
I believe that
it's
whatever's
still not a
happening,
thing.
I believe that there are occasions when I'm in pain and something's happening there, but I think we
It's,
misconceptualize it as this kind of pure felt experience. That's the thing.
no, I don't think it's a pure felt experience. I think it's related
There's
to
a
the material,
mysterious, private.
but it is felt.
These are descriptions we give of it, and they
You can
gesture
have a
at something.
system that has something felt and something that doesn't.
It depends what you mean by felt. If felt means something that presents a hard problem, then I don't think anything exists that presents a hard problem. Put it like that. I don't think,
So then everything must be felt.
or everything must, or maybe nothing is felt
Or
in that sense.
nothing is felt except that
In that sense, but that doesn't mean that pain isn't real. It just means that pain, we misconceptualize it as felt in a way that is wrong. Just as we
only thing
misconceptualize
that I
action.
can know about pain is the feeling of it. All my other beliefs
No.
about it could be wrong.
No, I totally, I think
You take
exactly
the
the
opposite.
opposite.
I know you've come to the
Almost
opposite
exactly the
conclusion.
opposite.
We have all the same arguments running all the way up until the very last step, and then we
this is what's frustrating me, because we have so much
I'm
agreement.
telling you, we
but
agree
it's
about
somehow there's
everything. We just,
there's
for some
something-
reason,
but
are
there's
drawing
some
the
point.
opposite conclusion.
In a way, I think
We're like
closer
Democrats and
to-
Republicans who get so extreme they all develop the same beliefs.
No, no, no,
guys,
I don't
I guess
have that
I don't like
feeling-
that comparison.
like
Never
that
mind.
analogy,
Let's
but-
cut that out.
Who's the Democrat?
I'm
who's the
really,
Republican?
I'm really intrigued by this. Actually, It's
I
really-
am too.
Anyway, Philip wants
I
to
always
get in,
have
it's more
been
about
as,
free will.
I followed your work, and of course, there's part of me
We-
that
I-
thinks
we
one
must
day
follow the-
one day I'll get you on board, because we believe everything up until the last moment, and then
I'll get you
you
on board.
think
We'll
your
do.
therefore there is no consciousness, and my therefore is therefore everything is consciousness. It's just the very
In a way,
last step
as
we
you
take
say,
is
that
different.
may come round like the
Yeah.
horseshoe thing to
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
don't think we disagree about anything else.
Right, we have
But pretty
some
much.
questions that have been sent in.
Okay.
Can I ask one more thing, Annaka? And
Yeah.
just going back to what we were talking about a long time ago, about this idea that
4 hours ago.
the unity of experience at a given moment is an illusion.
Mm.
Just made me think of a lot of philosophers going back to Bertrand Russell and
Yeah.
G. Moore talked about the unity of the proposition. And what they meant by that's a rather technical way of saying, thought seems to be something essentially unified. Like if I think
Mm.
Emma loves me, my wife's called Emma. Emma loves me, right? It's like you can't just get at that with like thinking Emma and loves and me. They've got to sort of come together, or they
No,
don't
they
have the
to be
meaning they do.
continually
So-
strung across time through memory. It's not something that happens in a split second. It is taking place over time. That's why I like Sarah's description of structures in time. Without memory connecting all the qualia together, yes, but there's no single moment where it's all happening at once. It's a process taking place over time.
Actually, talking of agreeing with Keith, this is reminding me a little bit of an aspect of Daniel Dennett, actually, Keith. What do you think? Where he says, there's no moment, it all comes together. It's
Right. Yes.
So-
It's
so the
an
level-
ongoing process. And that's part
But,
of the illusion of self, is that we think we're these
Mm.
concrete things when we're processes. And
what was
Yeah.
Dennett's term for this, Keith? The internal
multiple drafts, do you mean? Or
second
the
transduction. The second transduction.
There's no second
wasn't it?
transduction.
There's no second. Yeah, that's what I
no
mean.
second transduction. No, there's just spiking patterns. There's no transduction back into some phenomenal medium for witnessing by
Okay.
by itself.
right.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm
sure
going to go
Annaka agrees
away.
Yeah.
I'm going to go away and do a 10-day meditation retreat,
Oh.
and then we can come back.
Is this a
and-
public commitment?
No, well, it's not
Because
gonna
I
be
can
for-
arrange
not gonna be for a while.
that.
It's not going to be for a while, given I've got young
That's
kids.
fine,
If
I
I say to my
understand.
wife,
Yes.
if I say to my
He
wife,
meditates
I'm just
with
going
the,
away for 10
Your
days
kids
to
are
meditate.
little. Yeah.
But maybe we could. Okay, so let's. If you have a
when
few
your
more
kids are
minutes.
when your kids are old enough, you get a babysitter, or grandma stays with the kids, and the two of you go together. Sam and I have gone together. It's a sweet thing to go together. Yeah.
I would like to do that at
That's
some
my
point. I'm not sure
solution.
it's the first priority, but yeah.
No, you have to raise your kids
yeah.
first.
No, I mean, if we do get a chance for a holiday,
Oh, I
don't
see.
know.
I see what you're
I
saying.
think
Yeah, you just saw.
I'd
you
rather,
saw
I'd
a
rather,
window
I'd
for
rather
10
chill
days
out.
alone with your wife and going on a retreat is not. I get it.
Maybe the second time. Okay, we got a few quick questions. You got time for a few quick questions
Yes.
from gathered on Twitter? We've got a question here from Sruli Bruka. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correct. Can there be a new social contract or secular covenant between atheists and followers of faiths based on panpsychism and mutual lane keeping? I guess the idea is,
Bridge
could
between-
could panpsychism be a way of bringing atheists and religious people together in a common framework? Ending that binary,
Yeah.
I think is
This person is probably not going to like my answer, but I mean, maybe in a sense. I think. First of all, I don't like the category of atheism. I don't think it's a category of anything, really. It's not a belief system. There are lots of things I don't think are true, and if I read the Bible and the Quran and the holy books that I've read don't seem to me like a creator of the universe wrote them, and many of the things written in them are just flat out wrong. We know to be false. I mean, and so I just, I don't label myself an atheist. I don't think of myself as an atheist. I think of myself as a very spiritual person, who is curious and looking for answers to what this universe is, what our role is, I'm curious about where we are. And the best and most interesting answers that have come so far have come through science. There is some beautiful wisdom that to be found in many books. Some of them are religious texts. People learn a lot about how to live in communities and treat each other well and live lives that are focused on well-being. And a lot of that comes out of some of the religious traditions. I don't think you need to believe anything about the nature of the universe to accept those teachings of wisdom. I think if panpsychism if it turns out that consciousness, I won't even use panpsychism. I guess it's a little bit, my allergy to religion is a little bit part of the reason I have a hard time with panpsychism too. I think we're at a point in human history where I think it really makes legitimate scientific sense to ask, does consciousness go deeper than we have previously assumed? And if it is in fact fundamental, part of the structure of the universe, I think that lends itself to a lot of psychologically healthy ways of viewing things. And so I think to whatever extent we think of religion doing that, it can do that for us, I think. But I also think maybe it's a way forward, right? It's a way, if you're a religious person who's open to something like consciousness is fundamental, it seems like you're open to a lot of the things in your religious text maybe not being totally accurate. So I think it's about moving forward. And so if you're someone who doesn't fall under any, doesn't believe in any religions that have been offered so far, but you think consciousness might be fundamental, and you're a religious person who thinks that might, then it's nice to have something that is a bridge, an area of content that is basically a new way to look at how the universe works. I'll also say that, generally, I think something that we don't keep in view enough across disciplines is how young we are as a species. And that we have this incredible, beautiful ability to understand a little bit more and to fight our evolutionary pressures and get a bit of an outside view, which, as far as we know, other intelligent beings have not been able to do. And we're at the very, very beginning stages of that. I mean, I think we barely understand the universe that we live in. And if you just look at, scientific progress, and many people make these points, but from the time we thought the Earth was flat and we had no idea that there were bacteria or that there were other planets or other, all of this is, and I think even in terms of human well-being and psychology and living in peaceful cultures, I think across every discipline and everything we're interested in, the more we recognize we are capable of making progress, we are capable of better and deeper understanding, and maybe there's no end to that, but we're certainly at the beginning of it. And so I think I like to approach all of this as we barely understand anything, and let's try to understand more. And so I hope that, some version of being curious about consciousness and whether we've been wrong about it and whether it's something that's more fundamental, is something that brings people together and focuses us on kind of moving forward with what does that mean about the universe, if that's true.
Amen to that. One more question from an anti-panpsychist position, a question that comes up a lot from Tom Clark here. Is there any observational evidence for panpsychism? And if not, should that disqualify it as a research program? in explaining consciousness. What do you
Mm.
think, Annaka?
Yeah, no, I think about this a lot, and I wrote a piece called "The Strong Assumption" that is essentially an answer to this. That's on my website if anyone wants to look at it. I don't think there's actually any, when it comes down to it, there's any observational evidence for either side, and so I think we're making an assumption in either case. I think we are making an assumption that consciousness arises out of complex processing in brains, and we don't actually have any evidence for that. And no, it's impossible right now. I think there's a way in which we might envision the future of science where we could get a little more clarity on this. I think it may be something human beings will never have the answer to, but I think either way, it's an assumption. And so far we've spent many decades in the sciences going with the assumption that consciousness emerges at some point in nature, and I think it's an equally valid assumption to assume it was there from the beginning. And I think it's time to make some scientific investigations into the possibility that that's the way the universe is structured. So I didn't
Sounds
give
good to
as
me.
thorough an answer as I should have, but I did write about it, so it can, people can find it.
That's
there.
great. We should put that in the notes for the video. Well, thanks so much, Annaka. I think it's been a vigorous discussion, some
Yes.
agreements, some disagreements. Hopefully the audience is clearer on where the debate lies.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah. And Keith, I've been wanting
Thank you
to meet
very
you for
much.
a long time. It was a pleasure.
I
It was a
want to
pleasure
talk
to agree
you-
and disagree with you.
I want to talk to you more because
Yeah.
what you said at the end there, I think this dismantling of the dualism is so important. And in a way,
Yes.
the one thing that we're both doing is trying to dismantle it. I mean, you can put
Yes.
it everywhere, or you could say this stuff is nowhere.
Yes.
But you need to get rid of the idea that it's just special to us.
Yes. I know.
So
We're
there's
very
a lot
funny.
of
We agree on everything except the last leap we make is like you go that way and I go this way.
they did
But
a
we're
really
really
Don't
in
let
line
him
all the way
corrupt
up until
you.
the last moment. Yeah.
Don't let him corrupt you. He's seductive ideas.
One day I'll convince him that I'm committed.
I look forward to it.
Or if he convinces me, that will be great too.
Maybe we could meet halfway.
Okay.
Oh, thanks a lot,
Thank
Annaka.
you.
Thanks
Absolutely,
for
thanks a lot.
being so
And
generous with your time.
have you? We're going to put a link to Annaka's book. Wait.
Absolutely. Oh, and and your series. When is
Make
your
sure
series
that-
on conscious coming out?
Yes.
There you are.
Thank you. I'll just say my series will be coming out probably in 2 to 3 months. I don't yet have a date. But I am always putting updates on my website and on social media, so it will be announced the moment I know.
Fantastic.
We can follow that. Look out for it. Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Annaka. Have a lovely day.
Always good to see you. You too.
Thank you,
Take care. Wow, that was fun.
It was.
That was we've never sort of done Mind Chat like that before, where basically I hosted half of it and then you hosted half of it, and it sort of organically went like that. That's not really how we planned it, but yeah, I thought that worked quite well.
I like to not. I think planning too much is perhaps a bad idea because we want to let the discuss. The idea is we're having a chat.
Yeah,
and it's
clues in the name.
The viewers are listening in to us just chatting and following the conversation where it goes. And I think if you make it too structured, you lose that. You lose the spontaneity. And I think that's what makes it exciting. Anyway, that's my take on it. Well, now, you've messed up the outro on the last few occasions, haven't you, Philip?
Have I?
Yeah.
I don't know. I always get it spot on.
This time, I would do it. Okay, do it properly. Okay.
Oh, I don't like change.
I thought this is what you wanted me to do.
Okay.
Annaka thinks that that there's a certain kind of consciousness that is everywhere. I think that the kind of consciousness that you and Annaka believe in is nowhere. But we can all agree that consciousness is wherever it is,
Actually,
and
what's the bit you say?
goodness sake,
Sorry, I've never done it this way
You've
around. I've never done
written
this
it
way.
on this script.
Hold on, I know it. 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 And nowhere else.